Adonis was an orphan wimp that got rescued by a hot snow witch 𝐋𝐈𝐍, who teaches him magic until she is captured by the humans during the war against witches. He watches her die like a statue, then comes back 10 years later seeking revenge in a bid to redeem himself from the sham and guilt of being a failure. In the beginning, humans and witches were created by God. He made the witches swear to protect humans, but the humans turned on them and prosecuted them to death. Two witches get lost as they travel towards the border, and 𝐋𝐈𝐍, the female witch, tries to use a map to find their way through, but her companion uses a smartphone powered by magic to do it despite 𝐋𝐈𝐍's warnings not to bring such things along on their journey. She hits him in anger and tells him they need to keep moving. Instead, Adonis says he's tired of always running from one place to another. 𝐋𝐈𝐍 tries to make light of the situation, but it does little to cheer him up, so she uses her feminine 𝐒𝐍 to get him to stand up, and they start moving. Their goal is to find a place where they can live peacefully amongst humans, and 𝐋𝐈𝐍 wants Adonis to enroll in school, but he'd rather learn under the hot older woman.
Oh my!
He wonders why 𝐋𝐈𝐍 isn't more frustrated with humans, who they can just eliminate with magic. At that time, some soldiers show up trying to eliminate them, but 𝐋𝐈𝐍 uses ice magic to stop them, and the two attempt to make their escape. Back in the palace, the men try to explain to the king that they couldn't take her on, but he orders for more men to go after her. Meanwhile, Adonis throws a tantrum over not being allowed to fight. He throws a tantrum asking if he's not allowed because he's human, and he wants to be allowed to fight for her and protect her. As she comforts him, the humans start to teleport them using long-distance physical transfers to the central plaza of the capital. Meanwhile, the king addresses his subjects, telling them they will no longer depend on witches for protection, only technology, so they must eradicate the witches. The humans cheer at the sound of this. Then 𝐋𝐈𝐍 and Adonis land on the podium while the humans boo them. 𝐋𝐈𝐍 tries to attack, but her magic is nullified by some strange technology. The king steps forward and tears her top, exposing her melons, then proceeds to slap her. He says a witch that can't perform magic is just a woman. Adonis is furious, trying to attack the soldiers, but like a fish on land, he fails woefully, so the king orders that he be killed. Desperate, 𝐋𝐈𝐍 resorts to begging the king to spare the child's life, saying she kidnapped him and turned him into her slave. Adonis cries out at the sound of this, just as the king beheads her to the cheers of the humans. Years later, an internment camp filled with jailed women fighting over bread comes into view. They struggle amongst themselves until one volunteers hers and one snatches it, asking her to stay out of their fight. Another girl walks up to the Good Samaritan Doroka, asking her why she keeps giving others her bread, and she says she's fine. Anna says she admires Doroka because she can only think of herself in their war-torn times. Since the witches were eradicated, humans haven't known peace, and the thought of it all makes Anna burst into tears, but Doroka quickly starts a puppet show to cheer her up. Wardens start to call for 218, which is Anna's number, but Doroka switches with her and is made to appear before a man who asks her to strip. When she refuses, he walks up himself to inspect her goods, then she bites the man as he takes photos with her and steals his phone. It turns out it is a key to open all the cells, so she uses it to release the other girls, including the maximum security cell she finds herself in front of. The maximum security cell opens to reveal a grown Adonis tied up in chains in a rage. He kills the wardens, frees Doroka from her chains, and walks away. The other guards rush to the camp to contain the situation, while the director gives orders to a dim-witted executive soldier who tries to make jokes about the situation before leaving. Back in the camp, the man Doroka bit shouts in horror when he sees everyone has escaped, including Adonis. Meanwhile, Adonis, now free, starts to wreak havoc on the city, despite knowing 𝐋𝐈𝐍 wouldn't have approved if she were alive. He uses a giant figure to bring down tall buildings, and people run around calling for help, including the local police. Back in the palace, the general tries to see the king, but the queen says he is unwell, so he uses his own authority to declare a state of emergency. They mobilize all security protocols, including the magic photon suppression device that's been under a store for the last 10 years. They launch their attack, but all their shots miss. They can't seem to do any harm, their bullets bouncing like pillows off him. Because Adonis had 10 years of imprisonment, which he used to master magic mentally beyond anybody's comprehension. He kills both innocent bystanders and soldiers, but like the failure he is, he feels no relief from it. The attacks on him continue, killing more innocent bystanders at that moment. 𝐒𝐿 shows up to save a little child from getting crushed and goes to try to stop Adonis. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king is in a sick bed with his wife sitting by his side. She tells him all is well under control, and he coughs blood. He asks if God is trying to curse him for wiping out the witches and concludes by himself that the technology was what they needed, and he will not repent or be sorry for that. Outside it starts to rain, and Adonis has wiped out all soldiers except one when 𝐒𝐿 ran up to him to try and convince him to stop, but instead he kills the soldier. 𝐒𝐿 tells him 𝐒𝐿 wouldn't have wanted him to kill people like that, but this gets him very mad. She doesn't back down though. Instead, she shows him she's a witch too, and this gets him even more angry because she wasn't the knight in shining armor he couldn't be, and didn't come to save 𝐒𝐿 all those years ago. 𝐒𝐿 tells him she infiltrated the country to find him and free him because she and other witches need his memories of 𝐒𝐿 in order to resurrect her. But Adonis is stubborn and wants to kill everyone, including 𝐒𝐿. She resigns to Faith and tells him she's glad she met him. That statement evokes nostalgia for his love, 𝐒𝐿, and makes him calm down. Just as he's about to take her hand, she's shot. The town is on fire. Soldiers from the Empire are killing people, and 𝐒𝐿 is running, trying to make sense of the chaos, when Mia, another witch, comes up to tell her it's because of the new technology. Now the humans have turned on themselves, but there's nothing they could do about it because of the magic photon suppression device. Mia tells 𝐒𝐿 she must run away while she holds back the soldiers and find Madame Ophelia alone, even though the journey is long. In the present day, 𝐒𝐿 is dying in Adonis' arms, but she manages to whisper something about the other witches to her, just as he is surrounded by a new set of soldiers who open fire on him, but he turns the bullet on them and successfully wipes them out. Back at the military base, Yuki, the general's sister, tries to activate the magic suppressor, but the scientists refuse. Theta, their director, calls the general to inform him that the machine emits a human cellular dysfunction disease. Theta tells the general that if they turn the device on, all of humanity will be exposed to the disease, and since there are no witches to restore the natural environment, all will be lost. The general watches Adonis kill every soldier helplessly, so Yuki, trying to prove herself to her brother, takes matters into her own hands and turns on the device, but the little exposure harms her badly. The device buys them time and they are able to de-harm Adonis.
It's payback time.
A female soldier uses that window to run up to him and behead him. They all start to cheer her on and celebrate. Meanwhile, back at the base, the general directs his men to check on his sister Yuki and Theta. Later, the king addresses everyone, telling them they have finally eliminated the threat of Adonis and reassures the people that, with the power of technology, the Empire of 𝐒𝐿 is God, and God is dead. At school, during homeroom, the teacher addresses the students to move past the tragedy of the previous day and prepare for their mock exams, which are in 2 days, then dismisses them. One of the students, 𝐒𝐿, goes to where a mass memorial is set up for dead students and remembers in guilt how she left her boyfriend behind to die in fear. She drools over the witch's apprentice pictures, saying out loud that she thought Adonis was hot, and a voice behind her replies that it was shameful right behind her. She turns to see that it's a man who's with the government, and he tells her it's fine to allow her to go. As she turns to run, he calls into 𝐶𝐈𝐍, directing her to send men to get 𝐒𝐿, and informs her to have his hug and kiss ready for him when he gets back. 𝐶𝐈𝐍 is sick of the degenerate director and whines that she needs a transfer soon. Meanwhile, at the National Intelligence Agency, an overworked 𝐶𝐈𝐍 finds out that the body of Adonis that was brought in is fake. Adonis wakes up in a panic, and the women hold him down while Madame Ophelia brings him back by stimulating his mind. He calms down and flashes back to the battlefield, where he sees that the female soldier didn't kill him. She used a death cancellation spell and a duplication spell on him, then teleported him. Madame Ophelia hugs him for fighting for them, but he pushes her away, asking who she is before noticing the other women around him and realizing he is in the nation of witches. Later, he is wheeled like a vegetable around the palace, where he meets other witches who tell him they're glad he's alive, as 𝐒𝐒 would be devastated if anything happened to him. When he gets to Ophelia, he asks to be allowed to walk on his own, but she tells him he can't because humans cannot touch their grounds. He asks what was done to him, and she tells him he was simply invited to their land. She tells him 𝐒𝐒 was the most kind witch, but she was cast out for teaching magic to a human child. Ophelia tells him that magic to a witch is their soul and represents everything they stand for. And when 𝐒𝐒 took him on as an apprentice, it was unheard of. She was begged to stop and return, but she refused. Madame Ophelia conjures his quill, and Adonis rushes up to go and get it despite being told not to walk on the ground. She sends it to him, then he asks if she can bring 𝐒𝐒 back, and she says yes. Just then, he looks up to see they were in space.
How? Hold on, bro. How?
Seeing his surprise, Ophelia explains that they are in a secluded land beyond the reach of humans, built 10 years ago so that they could live peacefully. The nation which was located on the moon was called Lunamelia. Ophelia takes him outside where the dead witches' gravestones are, and then takes him back into the kingdom to show him 𝐒𝐒, a tree that produces witches. Witches are unisex and do not mate, but get their lives from the tree as fruits of the power of God. The tree was the last surviving one, as humans burned the others. Ophelia tells him 𝐒𝐒 is going to be reborn, but she can only become herself through him sealing his memory into a pod. Ophelia leaves him to soak in the information when another witch appears. She is the one who saved him, but he acts uninterested and starts walking away as she yells at him, saying he is selfish. Adonis doesn't care because he remembers 𝐷oroka telling him the witches are planning to use 𝐒𝐒. He tells Anne he knows the witch nation was planning to use their facility as a prison for human slaves, teach them his style of magic, and make them fight because they themselves are going extinct. 𝐒𝐒 is the only witch who can make such quills. The other witch begs him to help them, and he says his loyalty is with 𝐒𝐒, whatever she decides. Later they begin the ritual, and he starts to resurrect 𝐒𝐒. Adonis rewrites the ritual, and a confused 𝐷oroka falls from the pod in her birthday suit, just in time for him to catch her. She realizes she is naked running from him, melons and cheek cakes bare, so he gives her his cloak to cover up. The onlooking witches realize he resurrected 𝐷oroka instead of 𝐒𝐒, much to the fury of Ophelia, and they accuse him of not truly loving 𝐒𝐒 because of his human nature. He tells them he will hunt the humans down himself and burn the 𝐒𝐒, to the dismay of all the witches. Just then, a director of the National Security Bureau lands with an army of soldiers by invitation from Adonis. A water witch attempts to extinguish 𝐒𝐒's fire, but one soldier kills her while the other witches suit up for battle. They start fighting and the witches destroy them, but the human army keeps appearing.
Ah, shit! Here you go again!
On Earth, Director Theta is brought in by the National Authority Bureau director to explain how the witches survived. She tells him that the witches hijacked a physical transfer prototype to go to the moon. Later, at Yuki's sick tube, Director Yamato is reminiscing on all the feats she has achieved. On the moon, the battle continues, and the General Yamato is leading himself with revenge for his sister Yuki in mind. He goes for Adonis himself and manages to strike a blow, thinking to himself that he will retire with Yuki after this battle. He does a scattering bloom attack that wipes out most witches, including Ophelia and Anna. It's a bloodbath, and this enrages Adonis. 𝐷oroka cries out that she wants the fighting to end while the other witches are demoralized, crying about the burned tree and how they'll all be extinct. Ophelia, with her last breath, tells them not to back down or give up. He starts to launch his own attack against Yamato while the other soldiers continue to kill the surviving witches despite their attempts at fighting back. Adonis, for the first time, is matched with an opponent just like him because even though he cuts off one of Yamato's hands, he doesn't back down. Yamato raises his sword to strike down Adonis once and for all, screaming that he should die with the witches. Yamato raises his sword to kill Adonis, but 𝐷oroka yells that it is enough and uses her magic on it. Her spell is a love spell, just as her magic is love magic. Adonis is surprised at her power. She asks Yamato his name, and he tells her. Yamato is furious at himself for answering her and tries to break free of her spell, but she disables his mobility. Adonis cheers and tells her to use the chance to kill him, but she has other plans. She asks Yamato to stop fighting, shake hands, and promise he won't come back to attack them. She says if he does, she'll release him and his soldiers. Adonis is furious at this idea, telling her she is crazy for not killing the humans, despite all they have done, and the witches agree with him. Yamato takes that window to attack Doroka, blaming her race for his sister's condition, but she doesn't back down. She says he has killed a lot of people, but he has the chance to make things right by retreating. Besides, humans and witches used to be friends. Yamato tries to fight the love spell, but flashes back to his childhood just as he is about to say he'll agree. Adonis cuts off his head to the horror of Doroka.
What?
At the Radia Palace on Earth, a report is sent to the king that the fight is still on, and the king says he wants reassurance that all the witches will die, which the soldier gives. The king is hysterical at the thought of killing the witches, laughing like a hyena, while the foot soldier sent to give the message watches, baffled at the king's crazy behavior. He latches onto the queen and asks her to praise him like a dog looking for a treat, so the queen tells him he has done well and he can finally die. The king agrees, and the queen casts a love spell on him to dance to his death, which he eagerly agrees to do to the horror of the soldier watching. The soldier tries to call for help, but the queen casts a spell on him, and instead he calls for the death of the king. The queen calls for 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐏𝐍𝐿, one of the directors, and asks him if she shouldn't have killed the king. He tells her she was right to do so. The queen says her kind, witches, are a threat that needs to be exterminated because her magic doesn't work on them. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐏𝐿 tells the queen the world is hers, but she says she doesn't want the world, but she wants something totally different, and finally, she reveals herself as Dorothea, the witch of the unknown. On the moon, Adonis asks Doroka to join him and use her ability to destroy mankind, but she declines, so he tells her not to drop her current spell on the soldiers so he can kill them. Doroka begs him to stop because she's tired of all the bloodshed, but he doesn't. After killing them all, Adonis picks up Yamato's head and contacts the National Bureau of Science, trying to establish communication with Yamato. Using Yamato's voice, he tells them to tell the king they have won the battle against the witches and he is coming home, but Theta isn't fooled. The surviving witches realize this was Adonis's plan all along, cursing him for sacrificing them to destroy mankind as he starts to get teleported. The National Bureau of Science know they are transferring Adonis and Doroka to Earth, so they are armed and ready. They start to open fire on them the moment they land. They open fire on them, but Adonis and Doroka don't actually land there. They change the coordinates to the horror of all of them, including Theta. The two land in the middle of nowhere, and Adonis tells Doroka they'll start their rampage small, wiping out towns they find on their way to Radina. But she refuses, saying she wants to go back to the moon, where the last of her kind is. Adonis tells her she's being a brat because there's no way any of them survived, but she insists there are survivors. Adonis casts a nostalgic spell on her, telling her he now understands why she didn't fit in with the other witches, because she was a big wimp, unable to carry out revenge. Doroka says she doesn't understand why he is so caught up in revenge, and she used to be excited to meet him because she thought he could be a bridge between the two worlds, but now she knows better. He tells her he doesn't care because he will go to any lengths to avenge Chloe's death. Doroka is furious. She charges at him in tears, letting him know he's only alive because of the goodness of one person, and soon he'll end up like the humans who took Chloe away. Adonis tells her she doesn't understand that revenge is proof of her life to him, and he's really still the scared little boy afraid of the losing memory of his MILF. Adonis blanks out just as some human bikers find and help them. Later he wakes up in their hideout with one in the room offering him water, but he refuses. The human introduces himself as Punch, the person in charge of the settlement. Adonis just asks for the whereabouts of Doroka. Punch tells him she was taking care of him before the children came to drag her away, and he also tells him to follow him to look around. During their walk, Punch informs Adonis the settlement is full of all kinds of people trying to leave technology behind. Adonis hears Doroka screaming, so he asks Punch what they are doing to her, to which the man tells him they don't get a lot of young women around there, so they took her, but she's a screamer. Alarmed at the cultured act, he rushes to where she is, only to see she was riding a bike while the men cheer.
I got you, homie.
When she sees him, she stops asking about his well-being while presenting 2 dolls to him for reconciliation, but he throws them. Punch declares a party to the delight of the men, but to the dismay of Adonis. During the party at night, Doroka serves the men, including an old degenerate who can't help but squeeze dumplings, while Adonis sulks in the background. A young man amongst them asks if she and her boyfriend are fighting, but she says no, they're just friends traveling the world, which makes them all laugh. At that moment, they all start to fall into a deep sleep, alarming Doroka, who turns to ask Adonis what he has done. He says he reformulated their alcohol into a tranquilizer, while Doroka is surprised he could do such to people who were kind to them. He tells her he is leaving to continue his mission without her because she is too weak. In the morning, Punch tells her she is right to have left him. He tells her he has met Adonis before when he was a happy kid, and she will never win the argument about how wrong revenge is, as it was his own choice. Doroka concludes she wants to make sure Adonis doesn't die, so she pursues him with one of the bikes and catches up to him, but she can't seem to stop the bike. People gather to watch the imperial coronation, but first they eulogize the 23rd Imperial Emperor Goethe and his successes, including technological advancements that helped them wipe out the witches. The new emperor is revealed as Queen Dorothea, who performs a sensual song for them, which is actually a love spell. Some humans see this and think about how outrageous it is that all this time a witch was living in the palace while her kind were being slaughtered. Just as she finishes her performance, a magical crown appears on her head. Meanwhile, in the desert, Shirosagi watches Dorothea, his childhood friend, getting crowned queen from his smartphone, proud of her success, and then decides to get back to his mission of finding Adonis for her. Far ahead, Adonis and Doroka travel on the bike towards Radina, with him telling her that he will not drop his mission for revenge. He asks her why she didn't just use her magic on him from the first time they met, knowing she was sent on a mission to bring him to Ophelia, and she blushes, telling him it's because she knew he wouldn't have liked that at all. He agrees he wouldn't have. And for a moment, it seems like they are getting along just fine, with sparks flying and fairies forming. Soon enough, they get to the ruins of Sandland, a small town with nobody in it anymore. Doroka shows Adonis all the supplies she got from Mr. Punch, including a snow globe tent that she says Mr. Punch claims is just big enough for both of them. He finds it ridiculous, and he leaves to check the town, Doroka in tow, leaving a trail of chaos in her normal half-wit manner. Eventually, they stumble upon a hologram in the otherwise abandoned police station. They look around it more, and soon they find a singing prisoner who seems harmless, but Adonis doesn't let his guard down. Adonis says he is leaving as he has no business there, and the prisoner notes that's what everyone else said when they left the town for the Empire because of technology. Adonis asks for directions to the next town, and when the prisoner tells him, he starts to leave, but Doroka runs after him, insisting they should free the man first, but Adonis tells her he doesn't want to leave. The cell isn't locked, and the man is inside there with his dead wife, who was accused of being a witch and thrown into the cell for dead before they all left. He wanted to be left alone in silence, singing songs for her. They continue their travel through the desert until they find the state of Mamuta, where Doroka says she expects there to be a lot of people with heavy machinery. Then she says they should play rock, paper, scissors like an oblivious child, but Adonis declines despite her pleas. They enter the city, and instead of a metropolis filled with people bustling with life, they find ruins. They ride through until they find a bare-bodied woman. Seeing this, Doroka runs to cover her up, asking if she's okay, but she only says she must hurry up. She looks up at Doroka, analyzing her features, then concludes she's good enough to give her pleasure, and as she stands up to go to work on the witch, Adonis guns her down. Adonis tells a horrified Doroka that the woman was actually a doll machine made to give and receive pleasures for humans. They hear more happy noises from the playthings in the building, so Adonis tells her he'll go in, but she tries to follow him, and he turns to tell her she should stop acting without his command, insisting he will go inside alone. Inside, he starts to check around, seeing a pile of dolls yearning for pleasure. He then moves to another room that's dark, so he casts a spell to brighten the place, only to see Doroka following him. She says she's just trying to fulfill her promise to keep him safe, then continues to be delusional about his intentions. When he threatens to hurt her for disobeying, she starts to beg him, telling him she only thought it was better if they stuck together and she was sorry for disobeying him. He calms down, telling her to just not get in his way, as they find another room full of pleasure dolls that were still working out with a dead man, each groveling for a turn. The one on top turns to Adonis, asking him why they were created like that, begging for an end to their never-ending yearning, so he shoots them all down. Somewhere in the desert, a 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 crew are on their way to the ruined city, but run into Radiant Special Forces and easily wipes them out. Over in the abandoned city, Adonis and Doroka walk through the area, while he tells her it was bound to happen with all the technological advancements that they would create robot women solely for giving pleasure to men like the degenerates they were. They exchanged their women for radia pleasure toys from their daughters to wives till there were none left, and they fell to ruin, rotting from pleasure without another generation. Adonis says technology ruined civilization.
Perfect.
Then goes to mass mercy, killing all the pleasure dolls using his magic and an EMP. From afar, the 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 crew watches him, waiting for the perfect time to strike on another end. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 is also ready to attack Adonis, and when the crew sees him, they turn their focus to fighting him. Dokora pays her last respect to the dead robots, but Adonis says it's pointless because she should be thinking about giving the humans a taste of their medicine. In typical Dokora style, she says it isn't right to pay evil with evil, so Adonis tells her she should stay there and wallow since she thinks like that. He tells her he doesn't understand why she still travels with him despite the fact he caused her friend's death, and says it's her last to reconsider. Instead, she brings out the teddies of reconciliation that Adonis thought he threw away, saying she has her faults too, so she doesn't blame him for anything. He sighs and says they should leave, while an excited Dokora asks if that means they're friends, which makes Adonis start to banter with her until they hear 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 telling them not to make them jealous with their flirting. Dokora asks him who he is, while Adonis clocks that he is the enemy immediately. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 introduces himself, saying he's there for their head, but Adonis wants to skip the pleasantries and get to fighting. The intelligence agency director 𝐶HARMY talks to Adonis through a drone, telling him she found him through the coordinates of the device he used and that he shouldn't underestimate their technology. She tells 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 to hurry up and defeat Adonis so she doesn't have to work overtime. Adonis thinks to himself that he screwed up, as he truly didn't think he'd be found so far, and he also asks whose head 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 was holding. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 tells them he met them when he arrived at the gate, and they charged at him, so he killed them for standing in his way. Doroka yells at the retard for making the decapitated heads kiss, and he laughs at her while Adonis pushes her out of his way to start his attack. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 was quick to punch him before he could summon any magic. Adonis starts using a gun instead, firing as 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 dodges like Superman. He fires a huge bullet, but his opponent dodges desperate. Doroka uses her love spell to tell him to stop, and Adonis tells her to ask him questions about the Empire, but 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 bursts out laughing. He tells them he now understands why Doroka looks just like the Queen, who's also a love witch, and her magic cannot work on him because the Queen has already cast a spell on him. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 tears his shirt, releasing a bunch of mechanical hands from there to attack the two. Adonis tells Doroka to stand back because she can't help him, flashing back to the day the king killed Chloe, and how he said a witch who can't use magic is a mere woman. He shakes his head, trying to dispel the memory, because he wasn't trying to say the same thing to Doroka. Doroka tells him she won't back down even without magic, and even though she thinks what he is doing is wrong, she'll stand by him. Surprised, he conjures up a sword for her, and together, they start to fight the spellbound man. The sword Adonis made for Doroka is a Neo Reaper made of Zafal formula that pierces steel, which meant she didn't need any experience to use it. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 interrupts his explanation, yelling at them to stop flirting, and launches a hummingbird assault, which makes all the arms charge at them. The two teenagers try their best to get rid of them, but it is almost as if they are never ending.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
So Adonis does a spell to protect them and break the remaining mechanical arms. Once he is done, he launches a cannonball attack while the enemy launches a hummingbird castle counterattack that allows him to stop the spinning ball. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 is also able to block the blow from Adonis once the ball comes apart, but he doesn't expect 𝐷oroka to launch at him, and she wastes the opportunity to just hit his leg. He tells her she is tough, but she should have aimed for his heart. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 punches both her and Adonis so hard that she spits blood, but he lets his guard down, allowing Adonis to wrap him up, although he is quick to send his hands to hold Adonis down and stop his spell. 𝐷oroka finally starts to steel her resolve to kill the enemy, but she takes too long, and he disarms both her and Adonis. 𝐷oroka thanks Adonis for walking by her side nostalgically and says she wishes they had more time together as 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 blinds her. 𝐷oroka screams in pain as Adonis watches in horror, remembering how he couldn't protect Chloe all those years ago too. He yells furiously while 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 mocks him, telling him to enjoy the nostalgia, so he quickly dispels his armor to get rid of the hands holding him down, just as the ones holding 𝐷oroka leave her to fall, and he catches her just in time. 𝐷oroka tells him she cannot see anything anymore, but she's okay as it's nothing, and he should run as she'll catch up to him later. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 tells Adonis to come at him after all. He has balls too. In anger, he turns to 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 to see he is playing with the love witch's eyeballs, telling him to give them back, but the madman smashes them.
Come on now, dawg. Come on, man.
Adonis charges at 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿, picking up his magic quill, but he gets kicked and destabilized again. He holds onto the man's leg and throws him into the building as he doubts himself in his mind. Is he really still a wimp? He picks up his quill again, redirecting 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿's arm back to him, but again, he is quick to avoid it. Using the distraction, Adonis takes 𝐷oroka to one of the buildings, telling her to trust him. Then he proceeds to use the heat off one of the arms to burn her eye area shut to stop the bleeding. When he is done, 𝐷oroka thanks him, trying to apologize too, but he shuts her up. She keeps talking, telling him to imagine they lived ordinary lives together, because that was all she really wanted in life. Then she passes out. Adonis is furious at himself for not being able to protect any woman, and he strengthens his resolve to finally defeat 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿. He summons the giant he used to destroy the capital, yelling at 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 to bring his queen so he can blind her too, and this enrages him, so he launches his hands too. The two men launch at each other, but 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 seems to still be beating Adonis. He mocks the magician's apprentice about the amount of time his magic takes to activate, telling him that is why he can't beat technology. 𝐷oroka, on the other hand, tries to find Adonis, so 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 mocks her by imitating his voice so she can turn in his direction, where he holds up a beat-up Adonis. He flings the magician's apprentice, using his mechanical hands to give him a beating, while 𝐷oroka tries to find out what is happening in horror. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 holds her to a wall, tears part of her gown, and punches her to stop talking. He says he hates that her voice sounds like that of his queen, and that she was just a knockoff that deserves to die. He talks about his undying love for the queen even from the moment they met before she cast her spell on him. He has been devoted to her. 𝐷oroka tells him she knows nothing about what he is talking about, but aren't the witches supposed to be the enemies of humans? She begs him to spare Adonis's life and forgive his crimes because they happened as a result of humans' wrongdoings in the first place. 𝐷oroka says she isn't sure the humans deserve pardon after everything she has gone through, so 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 stomps on her head, angering her more. Adonis tells her to cast her love spell on him so he can finally defeat the bastard, and she agrees to cast a fight-back spell on him, which gives him a surge of power. 𝐷oroka has a flashback to when the other witches used to call her power obsolete because she could only control human men. Adonis sees this too, telling her he understands why she holds back now, but he needs her to cast her spells on her without restraint. He tells her she shouldn't always try to be pure, and she obliges, giving him more commands in such a way that he wouldn't be defeated by anyone. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 panics and tries to run away, but it is useless. Adonis launches his attack on him. In one swipe of his sword, he draws blood.
Let's go.
Then uses 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈���𝐿's mechanical hands as a stepping stone to him, delivering a heavy blow that sends him flying. Adonis launches after him still, breaking the hand he used to punch the princess, then the leg he used to punch her. 𝐒𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 tries to call a timeout, but Adonis doesn't even engage him. He uses his quill to summon snow, while the pathetic bastard desperately launches more mechanical hands, but the witch's apprentice is able to clear them all at once with the 𝐒𝐈𝐍𝐊 magic. Adonis does an absolute zero spell on 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 and wipes out the entire area they are in up to the settlers' area in the desert. Back at the intelligence bureau, they try to identify what Adonis have done, but cannot see anything but snow, and Oz appears telling them they were stupid to think defeating the apprentice would be easy. At the ruined city, Adonis and Doroka cuddle each other, whilst a figure like 𝐒𝐿 comes to hug him, and he looks up to see her disappearing into the lights. When they stand up, the princess feels warm in her new armor, so she asks if he puts her in warm clothes, but he just faints. Dokora holds on to him. Then, suddenly she hears 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐊 saying they both look eerily like the queen and her lover. He tells her to tell Dorothea he failed to get her the reincarnate, when the princess sees her and finally dies, fading into the wind. Doroka is puzzled, but Adonis calls her name at that moment, snapping her out of her head. He tells her he will fix her eyes while she blushes. In the city, the queen jogs outside, leaving everyone that sees her drooling after her until she reaches the palace podium, where she waves at her subjects, then goes inside. One of the palace guards runs after her with a towel, telling her she is royalty, so shouldn't be jogging alone, but Dorothea says everyone loves her, so they are armless. She asks the guard for the report from the crowns, telling him not to forget to inform them that if they don't adhere to her request, she'll declare war on them. Back in the now icy desert, Adonis covers Dokora with a blanket to prevent her from freezing, while she starts to say that the library spell she cast was just her directing his strong feelings for 𝐒𝐿 towards herself, and B tells her he asked for it because it was the only way he could defeat the rabbit bastard, so she shouldn't go into the details. Adonis asks her to lift her hair bangs, which she does while asking him if she looks hideous, and he says he's responsible for it. Dokora apologizes to the frustration of Adonis, who tells her she has said sorry 15 times, to which she still says sorry too. He says he thinks he's starting to understand her though. She might have been a clumsy wreck and a handful, but she was also truly kind. He tells her he takes back calling a hypocrite, as he could use some of her kindness. He comments that she has to grow a spine though, no matter how hard that may be. Then he blindfolds her so he can restore her sight, but she starts to get other pervy ideas, prompting him to hit her head, telling her 𝐒𝐿 is the only one for him. He tells her they shouldn't stay in the area for too long, and turns to the snow globe tent he said was stupid, before saying he never thought they would need to use it. Doroka says they should be grateful to Mr. Punch, then slips, but Adonis catches her before she can fall, which flusters her. He holds onto her hand, telling her he'll hold onto it since it's slippery, but she still asks him if he's sure, and he says a dumb witch once told him they should help each other. They start walking, resuming their journey to Radia.